What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Crush City Territory. I'm Chandler Rome, along with Tyler Stafford, and the most special guest that I think we could get any of you guys, former Astros general manager Jeff Luhnow. Jeff, before we get into, we want to talk to you a lot about what goes into a trade deadline, what a GM's life is like around this time of year, mid-July, when the trade talks start to happen. Before we get into that, I think a lot of fans are wondering simply how you're doing. How you doing? What's been up? And for those that haven't seen you in a little bit, what you been up to?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's great to see both of you. I miss being around the ballpark and all that. I live in Houston. I'm in Houston right now.
Mhm.
I never left, but I spend about half my time in Europe. I got into football, known as soccer here in the States, and actually today's a milestone day because we just closed a transaction. My group acquired a League One team in France, so now we have a team in Spain, in addition to a team in Mexico and a team in France. So I'm actually in the middle of my own sort of trade deadline. It's different in football. You have a transfer window that's open until the end of August, but doing it for about 4 to 5 teams instead of just one. So pretty busy, but overall doing well. Loving living in Houston, and happy to be around. And obviously been watching the Astros' success from nearby, and it's really incredible what the organization has been able to accomplish. I'm pretty proud of everybody there, and still know a lot of people there, and still know a lot of the players. So pretty happy to see what's happening.
How often do you watch? How often? I mean, I imagine you're not watching every game, but how often do you tune into the Astros, kind of keep up with what's going on?
When I can, it's not that often because when I'm in Europe, it's middle of the night.
Mhm.
When I'm here, I try and turn on the TV in the background when I can, but I keep track. I mean, mostly I go online and make sure that see what the results are from the night before.
What? So you said you just closed a deal with to acquire a team in France. Is that going to require you to learn French to move
Well,
to
I,
see some
I
stuff in France?
I downloaded a couple of language apps, and yes, the words are one thing, the accent is something else. So the team we acquired is in a town called Le Havre, which is Le Havre or Le Havre, depending upon where you come from. Texans would probably say Le Havre, but it's a port city at the end of the River Seine, and it's a first division team, historical team. It's actually the oldest team in continental Europe. It was founded in 1872. So talk about history. It's pretty, a lot of responsibility taking over a team like that.
So are you just purposefully buying teams in all the best vacation spots? You've got Cancun, Madrid, France now. Like what are you doing? You just what's next?
It's actually part of the strategy. You want teams in places where players want to go,
Right.
scouts want to go see. You can hire coaches, and I want to go, quite frankly. So it works out pretty well. And usually, at some point, you're going to end up selling these teams in the future, and the more desirable location you're in, the better. So
Could I interest you in the Sacramento Athletics? So in Madrid, so you were spending a lot of time there. My wife and I went there a few years ago. What's the churro place with the dip chocolate? How often are you going there?
Well, I mean, the food in Madrid is amazing. It's everything, the food, the wine, everything in Europe. It's healthier than the US, I got to tell you. And
Mm.
so you don't feel bad having a glass of wine or a churro because you know that it's not made with seed oils and all that stuff that our American food is made with.
That's what I was thinking too. All the seed oils. That's what I'm concerned with.
Jeff's, you mentioned it is kind of around your trade deadline in football. When you were around, when you were with the Astros, had they moved the draft yet? Had they moved the draft to July where it was all compact?
No, no, and pretty intense. I mean, I still keep in touch with Mike and Sig, and every draft week I talk to them a little bit. But and the guys around here, I see them in the neighborhood and so forth. But no, it's changed. I mean, a lot of the rules have changed actually since
Yeah.
I left. So I would have to do a refresher course to catch up if I ever came back into baseball. That's for sure.
So in your time, trade deadline this year is July 31st. We're
Yep.
recording this on July 11th, 20 days out from the deadline. in your tenure, kind of where were you guys as a front office at this point? Were calls being made? Were exploratory talks had? Or were you guys kind of still in? 'Cause every year you ran the team after maybe 2015, you guys knew you were going to be buyers
Yeah.
basically every season. How did those conversations go? Was it exploratory right now? Or were you guys still in kind of wait and see mode to see what you really needed?
The challenge is you need to be prepared, and preparation is huge in every front office and every general manager. And I'm sure Dana's doing the same thing. You really start preparing in June. Once you have enough feedback on how the season's going and you feel like you kind of have an idea where you're going to end up. And obviously, if you get off to a bad start, like the Astros have a couple of times in the past few years, you kind of wait and see and make sure that you get back into contention. Obviously, the Astros did that and are dominating right now. So really the only thing that they're probably thinking about is how do we improve this team to get back to making the longest possible run in the playoffs and getting back to the World Series. And so it all starts with the objective and being clear about what you're trying to accomplish. Now, that objective could change from July 1st to July 29th or 30th. And in some cases it did, but you're going to have to constantly think about where you're at, not react too much to short-term injuries and stuff like that. But a big part of the preparation in June and early July is making sure that ownership, the coach, the manager, the coaching staff, the scouts, and your front office are all aligned in terms of what the goals are. Because if you have different goals, and you're going to be hearing a lot of noise from the press, from the fans about what your goals should be, and sometimes they're spot on, but sometimes the fans lack the perspective of some things that they don't know, like the budget that you've been allocated, the injury status, maybe the psychological status of the players, ones that would be okay leaving, ones that wouldn't be, and so forth. So you kind of have to really, the month of July is intense because while it's the All-Star break and, there's some time off and all of that, you really have to be paying attention every single day to what's going on in the market. And the challenge is that a lot of the players that you would fit what you want don't really come available until their team either goes through a winning streak or a losing streak, or they have an injury or something else happens. So, you can have your list on July 1st of the players you want and start attacking them and try and do an early trade deadline. But if you're done by July 15th, you might miss out on the player that was perfect for you, that had you waited a little longer, you might have been able to get. So it's a little bit art, a little bit science, and it's a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and also a lot of communication. The communication with all the stakeholders has to be there, including the other teams. And there's a lot of touching base of conversations, a lot of inbound calls for your players, and then you've got to make outbound calls without appearing too desperate. And that's part of the art of it. You want them to think you've got options, and you want them to think that there's a lot of people after your prospects. So they're just one of like three. So stand in line and give me your best offer, and we'll see what I can do for you.
Is there like an unwritten rule of, you mentioned in July, you're kind of waiting to see where these other teams end up. If a team's like 7 games out on July 11th right now, is there like a, is it rude to call the GM and say like, hey, are you selling? Are you how do you figure those things out with all these other general managers?
Well, it's a great question. First, how do you figure it out for yourself? And, obviously fans can go to FanGraphs and see the playoff probabilities and all of that. And that became relevant for us in 2016, because even after, we made the playoffs in 15, got to, 5 games with the Royals. They went on to win the World Series. We felt like we had a team that could go deep in the playoffs, but we got such a horrible start in 16. And even though we made it back and got into contention, looking at the Rangers and the other teams that we were going to have to pass and looking at what was likely to be in the playoffs, we realized that our chances of making the playoffs were remote, and our chances of going deep in the playoffs were remote.
Busy guy.
France is calling.
Yeah.
So, that's the year where really, even though you said we were buyers from 2015 on, 2016,
right,
we were sellers, and the Fields for Alvarez turned out to be one of the best investments we ever made, giving up a proven reliever for a young man. But I think that's the key, is to understand what you think your chances are, and and also in 2017, it wasn't so much, are we going to make the playoffs or not? It was, are we going to win the World Series? And that, I mean, it was pretty clear to me we had a World Series caliber team. And so every move we looked at it in the context of how much will that player improve our chances of winning a World Series? And that's how we valued those moves. And I think obviously the Astros have been in that mode since 2017 and probably have a similar mindset. Now, in terms of no GM will ever be offended if you call him or her and say, I'm interested in your player, and they'll tell you, well, we're going to wait, ownership's doesn't want to sell quite yet. We're going to wait until right before, because you have the most information right before. But the reality is, if you look at those playoff odds by mid-July, they're pretty well set, and they're not going to change that much by the end of July. I think it's good to start having those conversations. At least let them know that you're interested, because you never know. There have been times when players get traded and you're like, wow, I wish I had known that player was even on the market, because I would have liked to at least thrown my hat in the ring. So you don't want that to happen. So communication between GMs is key. A lot of text messages and WhatsApps and phone calls going around, probably more messages than phone calls these days.
I imagine you had a ton of those during your tenure. We'll talk about a few of them right after this message from DraftKings. Nothing beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching baseball. And the simplest way to get in on the action is to download the Pick 6 app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for two or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. Nail your picks and you're heating up. Pick 6 brings upside with payouts up to 500 times. Pick 6 from DraftKings is the most fun way to play fantasy sports. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL for new customers to get a special sign-up offer. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Jeff, one of the code words that always makes me laugh around the trade deadline is untouchable. There were a lot of prospects in your day, some of which have matriculated to the Astros and done very well, some of which have not, that were, I guess, we as media and fans thought of as untouchable. I believe you came out a couple of times and talked specifically about Kyle Tucker and Forrest Whitley as guys that you didn't want to move. Is there such thing as an untouchable, truly?
There can be, and I think in the case of those two players, we weren't going to trade them. We felt like we had enough inventory in our system to acquire whatever players we needed. So I don't believe either one of them were ever in serious conversations. And I think, if you start to, I mean, there's some GMs that will just hound you regardless of whether you say they're untouchable, and they'll just keep adding players and other things and calling you back. And that happens, and that's fine. But the reality is, I mean, you've got to decide who you're going to build around and take a chance. And, I think one of the things that Bill DeWitt told me back when he hired me in 2003 is that he had been studying the trade deadline quite a bit with the Cardinals and watching how all the teams do things. And the trade deadline, especially those last few days, is when you can really destroy value more than improve your team. You can really destroy value by giving away good young players that could help you for the next 10 years for short-term improvements. And that stuck with me. And I always thought about that. And, it's hard to know young players, how good they're going to be. I don't think the Dodgers really anticipated Jordan Alvarez would turn out to be the way he was. And, we underestimated Teoscar Hernandez. We sent him away for a lefty reliever who, he got a couple key outs for us down the stretch, but it was a rental. And Teoscar's had a great career. So that, same thing I'd say with the other lefty that we traded away, Josh Hader. We traded for him, so obviously we knew he had.
I was going to say, you got to claim that part too. If you're going to claim trading him away, you got
the fact that we traded him away, but he wasn't ours to start with. We traded for him, got him all the way up to Double-A. We really, we're trying him as a starter. Didn't know if he was going to really be an elite closer. made a mistake on that one as well. And that happens. I mean, forecasting a AA or AAA or even recently promoted major league player their entire career, there's a big error bar around that. And you've got to take your chances. And Forrest Whitley didn't turn out to be, at least so far, the player that we thought that would put him in that untouchable category. But Kyle Tucker, my gosh, I mean, he's been unbelievable in every sense of the word. So, you take your chances and see what happens. And like with the actual game of baseball, you're gonna have a lot of wrong moves. You just got to hope your batting average is better than at least the teams in your division.
I'm offended you didn't call me. I was working for the Hooks in 2015, and I would have told you you're insane for trading Josh Hader. So I don't know what you were doing there. I would have helped you out.
Yeah. we knew he was good, and the deal wasn't going to happen without him. That's for sure.
How much do you reflect on that trade? That the trade, the Carlos Gomez, Mike Fiers trade for Hader and Brett Phillips, and who else was in there? Domingo Santana.
It was good. I mean, we traded a lot of value. We knew we were trading a lot of value. I think we didn't properly evaluate Carlos Gomez. I mean, if you look at what he did prior to us trading for him, he was reaching status of being a superstar and was athletic and filled a lot of needs for us. Had a nice home run in the wild card game, but that didn't make up for the 4 players we sent away. And Fiers was really good for us at certain times, for sure. He was our most consistent pitcher, I think, in 2016. But yeah, I mean, that one, if I could have that one back, that would be probably number one on my list of trades I'd want back.
I was at his no hitter, so we at least have that going for us. Yeah.
I believe that was the pinnacle of his Astros tenure. That deadline, though, a couple things. So that was when you guys had just sort of ascended. AJ in his first year, guys taking steps forward. Correa's up, but that was the year you guys were always in a contentious battle with the Rangers for the division. And I wonder, how much did you guys think that team was for real? And that was really your first deadline as a buyer. How did that deadline differ from maybe the many that preceded it?
Well, I think the ones before that, we were just accumulating as much talent as we could, and we were moving salary off the books and trying to get younger and really kind of get reset everything so we could make that jump. And 2015, I think, with AJ arriving and the dynamic of the team, we felt like we could make the playoffs, and that was really the only goal, is to make the playoffs, and we accomplished it. So, there were other deals that we had considered in July, and I remember there were a couple others that I was more excited about that didn't end up happening. But we also had accumulated a pretty nice inventory of good young players that had interest. I mean, the first couple of years I was trading, players that were okay, but they were like second-tier prospects or older veteran players like Brett Myers who could serve a role, but weren't that sexy or exciting either. So I was getting what I could for those guys. But by 2015, we had some good drafts, we had some good inventory, had made some good trades in the years prior, and so felt like we could take some of that inventory and turn it into more security to get to the playoffs. And that's we accomplished that. I'm not going to say we accomplished it because we got those 2 players, because I think we would have made the playoffs without those 2 players. But and it came at a cost. I think Kazmir's the other one I think we got that year. We needed a starter, so it was all about figuring out how we could make the playoffs, and that was for us that was successful.
Since we're in that time frame, you talked about you were trading veterans you were trading second-tier prospects for assets, but one of your counterparts, Dayton Moore, went on a podcast with Eric Hosmer a couple months ago and claimed that, and I believe it was in 2013. This is Dayton Moore saying you offered him Jose Altuve for Eric Hosmer. I'm going to give you the floor on that one.
Okay, no, so he's not lying. Dayton is a very honest, high integrity guy. We did have a conversation about it. It didn't go very far. At the time, we weren't looking to trade Jose Altuve. We were looking to acquire Eric Hosmer at the time. And, Kansas City was on the rise. And we tried everything. We didn't have a lot of players that would bring you an Eric Hosmer. Right. So at the end of the day, we're like, well, is he going to trade him or not? Let's just throw our best guy out there, our best young guy, and see if he'll even react. It was not an official trade offer. It was one of those, hey, would you consider it? And it was a very short conversation, so it didn't go anywhere. But also, yeah, we all have to remember Jose Altuve at that time was not what Jose Altuve became. And obviously, we had a lot of confidence in him. We re-signed him to 2 extensions while I was there. He's been the franchise player ever since. But he was not a heralded prospect. He made it up. He was still kind of getting his. He was a high batting average, low OPS. But boy, uh, he's done with his career is really spectacular.
Yeah, good call not trading him, I would say.
I guess that does just, I mean, from how we started this segment, I guess it goes to how it goes to show like there really are no untouchables. Like you'll like just see what happens. I mean, you said you were never going to trade Jose Altuve, but I guess there really is no such player that can never be off limits, I guess, in conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you want to know how rational the other team is, how serious they are. And so, part of negotiation is seeing where you're at. Is there really a deal to be had here? And there wasn't for Hosmer, so we moved on.
Is there a trade kind of in those early days that either I think people always want to know what could have been, what was on the finish line, what was some things we're making.
Bryce Harper, that was not those early days,
right?
That deal was done. It was done. Players were agreed to. The only thing left was ownership approval, and the ownership said no, even though they had kind of pre-cleared the deal. So that was huge, and that would have changed a lot of stuff for sure.
Bryce Harper would have looked pretty good, and as I think we talked before the Astros played the Phillies in the 2022 World Series. Jeff, you and I talked about what that package would have looked like, what the players were agreed to.
Yeah,
it was. I don't want to say you would have fleeced him, but you would have fleeced him.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been in the Justin Verlander category of players that all had value that they appreciated, but didn't end up hurting the Astros had they gone. So that would have been nice, and that would have been. I mean, the day we thought we got him, I called AJ, and he's like, the Christmas in July. This is the most amazing thing I can even imagine. So,
do you have to be careful about that? Like telling the clubhouse, telling AJ like what you guys are working on as just to maybe not get their hopes up, because like the learners can veto a trade at the last minute. Like how do you have to balance that of not getting your clubhouse's hopes too high?
Well, with AJ, it was different than with other managers because AJ was a general manager, and he and I were so closely attuned and aligned in everything that he was involved in a lot of the trade discussions in who we wanted, and he helped negotiate the Verlander trade very much so because he's very close. Obviously, he's close with them. He got hired by them, but he was very close with Al Avila in the front office over there. So whenever we needed to do a bad cop, good cop, I would be the bad cop, and I'd say, "We're done. We're not going to do that." And then, AJ would call up Avila a few hours later and say, "Hey, he's serious. He's not going to do it unless we change this, that, or the other." And so it kind of worked to our advantage. But yeah, I mean, I think with managers, they need to be involved, but they need to understand that this is the front office's process, and you certainly don't want word to filter around the clubhouse. It does anyway because rumors get out and conversations get leaked, but you certainly don't want a ton of that. And well, obviously, I had my fill of that when we didn't make a big splash trade in 2017, and then Keuchel went to the locker room and said, he was disappointed in me and what we were doing, and but that happens. That was sort of after the deadline, but yeah, I mean, managers are key, and I think more and more managers are heavily involved in the process.
Speaking of, Keuchel, that was obviously a big story in 2017. You mentioned, your job is to try to tune out as much as you can outside of that. I have to imagine that made its way, to you. That's a big deal in the office. Like when a player has comments like that, does that affect how you go about your job, or are you like altering plans based on things like that?
No, definitely not. I mean, I went down to clubhouse, and I spoke to Keuchel individually and explained to him, gave him a little bit more context about what we had tried to do and get kind of what the way we saw things. And he appreciated that at the time. But, I think he was seeing himself as the leader of this team, having won the wild card game and been sort of the Cy Young and been our ace for a long time. He had the right to express his opinion, but it's really more the manager and the pitching coach that I think have to manage that to make sure that if there is some comments that they don't kind of negatively affect the team. That was really more Strami and AJ's role.
Since we mentioned it earlier, I do want to, for those that are listening and that haven't heard the package that the Astros had agreed to send to the Nationals for Bryce Harper in 2018 was Randy Caesar, Abraham Toro, Josh James, JB Bukauskas, and Kent Emanuel. Abraham Toro is still a very nice role player for the Boston Red Sox, having to play a little bit more. He's carved out a very nice career for himself. Those other guys have had their fair share of struggles. So Bryce would have been a rental, Jeff, but I think I asked you this at the time. Do you think that Jim would have entertained the sort of money and years it would have taken to keep him in Houston beyond that expiring contract?
I don't know the answer to that, but I think had Bryce Harper come in and done what Bryce Harper normally does, and we win the World Series with him, it would have been certainly something that the organization would have made every effort to try and sign him, for sure. I mean, that was a hope. It was not one of those, negotiate a deal before we trade for him. We knew it was a rental, but we also knew that we were a franchise on the rise and could afford to spend on a free agent like that.
How much, since we brought him up, how much did Jim get involved when you were? I mean, he runs a budget. He has the money. He signs the check, so obviously he is involved inherently. But was he maybe more involved in some trade deadlines than? I know you've only worked for two owners, but maybe more involved than some other owners in the game, and how he wants to be kept abreast of things and things of that nature.
No, I mean, Bill DeWitt Jr. was very involved and wanted to know everything, every conversation that was happening and so forth with the draft as well. So I'd say DeWitt was more active. Jim certainly wanted to know what was happening and, certainly wanted to be asked if we were going to require any more resources, because a lot of times you're taking on extra salary or you're taking on a contract or you're trying to move a contract. I'd say, the trade that he probably got most involved in sort of emotionally was the Greinke trade. Because we were on the fence about the Greinke trade, and there were other options that we were considering. But Jim did seem to want that player on our team and wanted the sort of sex appeal of Greinke and all of that. And so, would we have made the trade without Jim's pushing us? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I mean, I think he was definitely excited about it. And, every time the trade would die, which trades die a lot, and that one died like 4 times in the 24 hours before we did it. He would say, well, what about, if we took on a little more of his salary? And I'd say, okay, well, in that case, yeah, I mean, sure, we'll make another run at it. So that was one where he was involved. I'd say, Verlander, he was interested in what was going on and he had to approve the money. And they were, we had limits and the deal wasn't done because of those limits, not just players, but money. And so he had to make a decision in the last few hours to approve more budget for that. And he did. So that was, without him, those two players certainly wouldn't have gotten to the Astros.
Yeah. How do you, when you're communicating with ownership about trading and, things like that, like it's hard enough to know all of the guys in your own organization, much less when you're trading outside of the organization. How do you present to ownership why you like a certain player or why you're comfortable moving one of your own guys? And, like how are you presenting that to ownership?
No different than the way we would talk about it internally. This is how much value we see in the player's career. This is how much we're going to have to spend to have that value on our team. And here's what the alternative looks like. So, we had our own, and I'm sure they still have some version of it today, our own way of forecasting player performance into the future based off of a lot of factors, including their past performance. And so, we'd look at that. And with the Verlander situation, it really came down to what's the additional amount probability that we're going to win the World Series. And no one player in all of baseball increased our chances more than bringing in Justin Verlander at that point in time because of what he did, knowing he was going to pitch probably 3 times in a 7-game series, knowing, he was going to probably help us get home field advantage. Those 2 factors were huge. And it meaningfully changed. I mean, a 1% chance increase of winning the World Series is worth millions. And especially for a franchise that had never won a World Series, because then it propagates in branding and all kinds of other things that it's hard to value in a spreadsheet. But that's really the way we presented it. I forget the exact number. It was, obviously low single digits, but it was meaningful. And we said each percent equates to this many millions of dollars. So whatever we're spending right now in prospects, I mean, the prospects are worth a lot too. Each prospect, we valued it not just in career performance, but also how much value you would have to spend to get that same performance back from free agency.
Did your spreadsheet take into account Verlander just yelling with hairy arms in the dugout in the World Series? That had to have added a couple percentage points.
No, but makeup matters a lot, obviously, and it didn't take into account Kate Upton and
Since you mentioned makeup matters, I want to take you to a deal you made in that deal that did go through in the 2018 deadline for Roberto Osuna. That deal was maligned very, very much by a lot of people that were uncomfortable with trading for a player that was under a suspension for domestic violence.
Yep.
What made you comfortable executing that trade, and what kind of backlash did you receive maybe within your own organization and from the outside?
Yeah. So, that was a challenging one. That's probably one that falls into the category. If I had to do it all over again, would I do it? The answer is no. The talent was clearly, the first thing I wanted to do, Jaime Garcia pitched with him as a teammate. And when we went to Toronto that year, he said, "Hey, by the way," he talked to me about the whole situation, said the kid's really, feels bad about what happened and he's remorseful and, he needs a change of scenery. I really recommend that you guys look at him. And that was the first time we even considered it. We did a lot of research. The research was really split into 2 camps. There was the talent, and I know that Kevin Goldstein and others have talked about the fact that they had objections to the trade, not because of the talent, but because of the other stuff. But I asked our scouts, look, the issue of whether or not the Astros should trade for a player that has has been suspended. I'm going to handle that with Jim and Anita and Giles and the HR, everybody else. What I need now from you guys is a clean talent opinion. How much will this player help us win? I mean, Ken Giles was imploding. We didn't have a closer. We'd come off a World Series win. We needed back end inning. We knew Presley would be a good setup man. We didn't know if he'd be a good closer. And at that time, Osuna was the most successful closer of his age in the history of the game. I mean, really incredible what he had done. So I asked the guys to just look at that. And I know that got misinterpreted as I didn't want anybody's opinion. I knew that there was going to be differences of opinion. I didn't want the whole room to be talking about whether or not we should, bring in someone that's been suspended. Separate from that, had a lot of conversations about with Jim, with Anita, with Giles. We did our own, research as to what we could find out about the situation. A lot of the information was not out in the public, and also spent time talking to the player, talking to his agent, talking to his teammates, and so forth. But really, the decision I was trying to make is this, do I think this is a one-time event that he regrets and is remorseful about, or do I think that this is we're bringing ourselves a problem? What I didn't really take into account was, I talked to a lot of people that had dealt with issues like this. And if you don't give people second chances, there was that whole argument, you're hurting their family, you're hurting the person that was the victim, potentially more so because they're losing income and all that. So there's a lot of issues going on there. I didn't take into account as much as I should have, the impact it would have on our fans, especially our female fans, and how they would feel. And that was a mistake. And, I did talk about it with female friends and family, but I probably should have spent a little more time thinking about it. But it wasn't, yes, I made the decision to trade for him. I did not do it unilaterally. The talent checked the box for sure. And there were, everybody that was around me that I collaborated with was, there was nobody saying don't do it. Because if someone had said don't do it, I mean, obviously we wouldn't have done it. So, but that's a tough one. I mean, I will say he, he's been a pretty good pitcher. He got injured and he hasn't been really able to pitch in the U.S., but he's been a good pitcher. Did he help us accomplish our goals on the field? To a certain extent, he did. I still think he could have been better. Giving up that home run in Game 7 against the Yankees was not great. But thank goodness we had Altuve there to make up.
Thank goodness you had Altuve, not Eric Hosmer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one that it's a tough one. I learned a lot from that experience. And I think I would do things differently today than I did then.
Let's hear from our friends at Foul Territory one more time before we continue with Jeff Luhnow.
Hey, let's do a little player spotlight thanks to Arena Club. AJ, give me a player this season that you think is underrated and you might want to try and grab his card.
James Wood. I don't know that he's underrated, but Washington Nationals superstar in the making, and the first slab pack I ever opened had him in it. His rookie card, and the value is only going to go up and up and up. And I'm not going to sell it quite yet, Scott. I'm going to hold on to it because after he continues to hit big homers and put up the stats, make all-star teams, it's going to get more expensive for someone to buy for me.
This is his first full season in the majors. Keep that in mind. I think he's underrated. He's on a Nationals team that's meh. Not getting enough attention. He might hit underrated 40 homers.
When he makes the all-star team this year, they're not going to be underrated.
That helps. He's been intentionally walked 4 times in a game. Anyway, if you want to try and find a Wood rookie card, go check out slab packs on Arena Club. And right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack. Or if you just want to go with a card purchase, go to arenaclub.com/FOUL. Use code FOUL. If you buy, sell, trade, collect, go for it.
We already talked about you mentioning Jose Altuve in a trade conversation, so that probably takes the cake. But is there one trade or permutation of a trade that maybe advanced a little bit further than that one, that included a player that Astros fans have come to fall in love with, that would surprise them to know that you guys were considering moving on or trading them?
I don't think so. I mean, Bregman, Correa, Springer, they were never really in any serious conversations. I think Keuchel, we did talk about trading a couple of times. I can't remember the exact context there. But because he was a high achiever with sort of marginal stuff, we weren't going to get back the return. If he threw 98 and was a Cy Young winner, that'd be different. But throwing 88 to 90 and having to rely on finesse, I mean, that he's a good pitcher. He's had a good career, but I can't. I'd have to think about that. Nothing comes to mind. Catcher wise, trading for Martin Maldonado 2 years in a row was hilarious. I mean, he was good for us. Jed Lowry coming and going like every other year. That was interesting. But no, once you get good players that fit and are part of your clubhouse chemistry, like Springer and Correa and Altuve and Bregman, you don't want to trade them unless you really do the math and figure we're not going to be able to re-sign this player. We're going to have to trade them in order to do kind of the Herschel Walker thing and bring in a boatload of talent and try and extend our window for another 4 or 5 years.
I mean, speaking of Correa, when you guys took him number 1 overall, it was not expected. Certainly, can you talk a little bit about the process leading up to the draft? At what point did you know you were taking Correa over Buxton or whoever else you guys were looking at in the top of the draft? How close were you to not taking Correa, I guess?
No, we weren't close at all. We were going to take him, but the number of people who knew was limited to Mike Elias, Sig, myself, and Enos Cabell. That was it. Because on our draft board, he was like number 8 or 9. And you don't want to go into your first year as GM and grab a magnet from our number 8 or 9 and plop them all the way at the top and say, I'm the GM. You got to do what I want. So, there was a lot of work behind the scenes in the week leading up to the draft. We were trying to figure out, more importantly, we didn't want anybody to know we were going to take him, because then teams number 2 and 3 would be like, well, wait a second, maybe we should be thinking more about him. And you kind of create demand that wasn't there. We knew the Cubs were going to take him. And that was really we knew we had to pay him more money than the Cubs were going to pay him at their position. I think it was 5 or something like that, maybe 6. And that was it. Nobody above the Cubs was going to take him. And so we also knew we had an opportunity, because he's the player we wanted. We thought he was the best player in the draft. He was the youngest high school player in the draft. And everything, he checked every single box that we liked. We knew that we could also potentially get him at a discount relative to the 1-1 price and go and get a Lance McCullers and a Rio Ruiz type player with the surplus. And so managing that meant we had to keep the information circle really, really tight. I don't even think I told Jim until a few minutes before. And the draft room didn't know. I mean, we walked in there because I didn't get the final okay. Carlos was in New York for the draft, and his agent was somewhere else, and we didn't get the final okay on the on the fact that we had agreed to an amount until I ran down the hallway, and basically Bobby Heck was a great scouting director, and he did a good job managing the process. He was kind of waiting. We had Appel and Gossman. There were other players in the mix. Buxton was the other player in the mix. In fact, it had gotten to the point where I didn't hear back from Correa, so I called Buxton's people 5 minutes before the draft.
Oh, wow.
Sure that if we took him, we could get a discount on him as well, and that he was signable for us. But then Correa's guy came back, and we got it done.
What would you have had to pay Buxton?
It would have been more, substantially more, because he was going to go.
He got $6 million as the second pick. So
yeah, he was going to go number 2. So you can't really say, hey, we're going to draft you number 1, but we're going to pay you a lot less than you would get the very next pick. So Buxton was a good player, but I think we made the right choice there.
The Cubs picked 6th that year. They took Albert Almora.
Yeah, that's right.
Instead of that's a tough loss for them to go from Correa to Almora.
Max Fried went 7th too.
Max Fried did go 7th. And then who went after Max Fried, Tyler?
That was Mark Appel to the Pirates.
Yeah.
He did not end up signing that year. He went back in the draft. I don't know if you heard, Jeff, but he was available the next season.
We liked Mark. We were trying to pull him down to our second pick. McCullers, he got.
Jeff, as we're talking about all this, and like you start thinking back, and the memories start to flood back. I guess the natural question is, like, do you have the itch? Do you have the itch to get back? Do you have the itch to get back and work in baseball?
I have a unique perspective now, because I'm actually I'm not the GM of my football clubs. I'm more in the role of the owner.
Yeah.
But I still, obviously, I get more involved than your typical owner would. And there's so many interesting differences in the world of football and to baseball that I've been in and out for 5 years, and I absolutely love it, and I'm enchanted by it. But to be honest, I don't think a lot about coming back to baseball. But having this conversation with you guys and thinking about all this history and things that I did well and things that I didn't do well, and kind of the perspective around it, it certainly would be fun and interesting to go back into baseball. I know that my teams and my investors and my partners would probably not like that a lot at this point.
Do you think?
Go ahead, Chandler.
Do you think that path's open for you? Like, if you'd ever want to?
Yes. I mean, I've had. I'm not going to tell you who, but I've had 2 or 3 owners contact me and ask me if I was interested in either a role as GM or another role, maybe as a different role where I'd oversee the sporting operation. And in all cases, I said no, because at the time I was raising money and starting my company. But I don't think I'm blackballed from baseball, like some people think. And I know I would do a good job. I mean, I know that for a fact, but the reality is I've moved on. I'm very happy. The world of football is incredible. And I think, we're doing something incredible with not, a lot of investors in football have tons and tons of money. We don't. We have smart, young, aggressive people and enough capital to go buy teams and grow them. And that's and be smart about player signings and all of that. The biggest difference is the player has to agree. You can't just draft a player or trade a player without the player agreeing, and that changes everything. And you can also sell players, and that changes everything too. So it adds two different dimensions to player acquisition and retention and roster management. And fans get used to the fact that you might have a Carlos Correa, but in 2 years, Carlos really should be playing for a bigger team. So they're happy to have him for 2 years, but they understand that he's got to go. That it doesn't happen in baseball because bigger team would be the Yankees, and no Astros fan would want Carlos Correa to play for the Yankees.
No.
Don't even say that sentence. What are you doing? I mean, you mentioned not having a ton of money for soccer. Have you considered having some Hollywood A-listers make a documentary about your team? I think that's worked out well for Wrexham.
Yeah, it has. And those guys have done a good job. We actually did film quite a bit of content last year, and we're in the process of thinking about pitching it as a documentary because I had 3 teams going for a championship, all within 10 days of each other. And 2 of the teams won their championship. The other one fell a little bit short, but I hired a camera crew and they followed me around, and we were in the locker rooms before the matches. We were celebrating after the matches. It was, one in Czech Republic, one in Mexico, one in Spain. So it was a lot of great content, and there's a lot of interesting storylines. We did release a documentary in Spain about the Leganés championship last year, and we were supposed to play. Leganés is actually in the U.S. today. They're currently in Chicago. They're going to Louisville. I'm heading up there tomorrow. We're playing a match against Louisville tomorrow, and then we're playing against Richmond next week. We were trying to get a match against San Antonio because the Spurs are friends of mine and they own San Antonio FC in the USL. Had we been able to get that match, I was going to bring the entire team here to Houston, and we were going to rent out the theater and show the documentary and invite Astros fans to come see it. Decided not to do that. I may do that in the future because it's really fun, and the content around sports is huge. And I think both, there's obviously been a lot of documentaries. I haven't seen the new documentary on the Astros, and I'm curious as to how they can do an entire documentary about our dynasty and never even call me. But that's okay. I'll leave that to someone else to think about.
Well, if you need help making content over there, estoy practicando mi español, pero yo no es fluido todavía. So, maybe if I live over in Spain for a little bit, I'll get a little bit better. That's all just from learning while teaching junior high in Highlands, Texas.
That's
so
awesome.
my students taught me quite a bit.
That's awesome.
So Jeff, you try to stay away from all the I guess content that's been created about your tenure, and the dynasty that you helped to construct.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. I've seen it all, so it's not that I'm staying away from it. I see it all, but I don't dwell on it. I mean, I think, depending upon who's producing it and what perspective they have, there's a lot of bias in any content production, whether you're trying to sell something or make someone look good or make someone look bad. So I don't, it's not something I spend a lot of time dwelling about. I am very proud of the fact that the Astros, I mean, there is no other dynasty in the 21st century that comes close at this point. So I know I wasn't there for the whole thing. I was just there for the beginning, but put them on a good course and very happy about what happened. Still know a lot of people. I see people walking around my neighborhood that still work for the Astros and still in touch with people. So I'm very happy for them.
Have you been back to what is now Dyken Park?
No.
You have not?
No, I have not.
You think that'll ever happen?
I'm not going to just buy a ticket and go to a game.
Right.
If the organization ever felt like inviting me, I'd be more than happy to. Some of my investors at Blue Crow are Astros investors and season ticket holders and stuff, and they've invited me. But no, I'm not. I don't want to distract from what's going on there, and I think me being there would attract some attention. So no, I don't. I've been to Rockets games. I've been to Texans games. I've been to. I haven't been to a Major League Baseball game since I left. Yeah.
Really?
Wow, really?
But I mean, I've been to Champions League. I've been to, I've been a lot of. I attend a lot of sporting events.
Did you go to the Gold Cup final?
No, I didn't. I was flying back from. We had our own match. Leganes played Pumas in Mexico on Sunday in front of. It was a friendly match, preseason friendly. There were 45,000 fans there for the Pumas. It was really incredible.
There was a large rivalry in the Astros clubhouse in the Gold Cup semifinals with Honduras. Honduras was playing Mexico. Isaac Paredes, obviously a Mexican, and was very into that. Mauricio Dubon, the only Honduran player to ever play in the big leagues. Mauricio wore his personalized Honduras national team jersey to take BP in Colorado that day, so that was fun.
That's awesome.
I told them they kept it close. They tried their best because that was a real underdog story, right?
Yeah.
Like Honduras was not supposed to be that far, right?
Yeah. Well, a couple of the players are investors in Blue Crow. I'm not going to tell you who, but so there's definitely some football fans in there.
Oh yeah, I can 100% concur with that. Well, Jeff, I told you we'd keep you 30 minutes. We kept you 51.
Hey, I enjoy it. I enjoy it. And
that's on me.
I hope fans enjoy it, and I hope the fans start checking on CD Leganes scores and Le Havre scores in France and Cancun FC scores in Mexico, because it's a good sport, and it's fun, and I'm having a good time.
You're still active on all social media. Tell people where they can follow you if they want to keep up with your ventures, if they want to get to know more about the sport of football through you.
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter handle is the same as it's always been, Jay Luhnow, and Blue Crow Sports Group. We don't do a lot of social media, but actually, Leganes has a social media in English, and Leganes has probably some of the most compelling content in Spain for football. So you can find it on Twitter and Instagram. CD Leganes is the name of the club.
I just found them, and I'll shoot them a follow. You can always
our mascot is a super cucumber, and I've always dreamed of Super Cucumber and Orbit getting together and playing around. Orbit's the best mascot in Major League Baseball, and Super Pepino is by far the best mascot in European football.
You got Big Poppy as your mascot over there? All right.
On that, we can agree that Orbit is hands down the best mascot in Major League Baseball in Houston anywhere. Get Orbit and the Big Cucumber together. That should be right after Tyler goes to the zoo with Cam Smith. We're gonna get Orbit.
Super Cucumber. He's got a cape and he's a superhero.
We'll end it on the Super Cucumber. You can follow Tyler on X at Tyler C. Stafford. You can follow me at Chandler_Rome. As always, please rate and review us on Apple. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get alerted every time we go and post a new episode like the one we did with Jeff today. Jeff, again, we cannot thank you enough for your time, for your insight, and for getting us into the mind a little bit of a GM around these busy times.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It was nice catching up with both of you.
Thanks for not trading Altuve. Bye.
Bye.